Yeah, hello again, Hoojies Garage here. Today it's time to talk about this thing, timing belt. As many engines have, also this Renault 2-liter turbo engine has a cam belt, and it's a sad story, but that's the way it is designed. The timing belt is recommended to be replaced every 6 years or 75,000 miles, 120,000 kilometers. And I think that for most people having a Megane RS, that would mean that time comes first because it's more of an enthusiast car. I've noted that people really moan about the cost for replacing it. I think that the work is at the professional workshop. I would think that they charge around 1,000 euros for the work. It's a whole day of work to do it for them. And then the material is another 700, maybe, something like that. Now, when I bought this car, I got a box saying Bosch, and it had this timing belt kit with some pulleys and screws and stuff, and also the water pump. So I thought, okay, how hard can it be? I know some people are really afraid to mess with this by themselves because, if you get it wrong, then if you get it really wrong, then the valves will hit the pistons and you can go and buy another engine. But I'm not that afraid. I do have respect for this work because it requires some attention to detail, but it's doable. At least I thought so until I lifted off the cover and I saw this thing. The timing belt. Yeah, okay. How bad can it be? So I started to search the internet, of course, as everyone does. And I found a few things. I found replacement interval guide, repair time, hours, and so on. This is for the F4R engine, this one. F4R or F4Rt. So this should be the T model then. It's very little basic guide, and okay, at least it has some torques here, good. But it's not the full story. Then when you buy a kit, you also get a little thing here that everyone should understand, of course. And it's also not that detailed. Then I happened to find another document that seems to come from Renault, and it's far more detailed. I think this one was quite good, and it solved one key thing that I didn't really understand initially, and that was how the hell do I stop the the flywheel or the crankshaft from rotating when I have to take the pulley away. And I was looking and looking and looking, and no. Where is that? Where can I get access? I've worked on some older Saab engine, and then you bought a little part of the gear, a little gear segment, and then you screwed that in an area where you could get access to the flywheel. But access to the flywheel, come on. But that document was really helpful. It says that you should insert a screwdriver from below. And I thought, my God, a screwdriver into the flywheel? Well, if that's what it says, then it should work. I wouldn't have thought that you could load those little cog segments or cogs with such a load, but if it says so, okay. So I started the procedure. So what do? First of all, you typically would reverse up the car on some blocks, so you get up the rear end. Then I lifted up the front end, so I got another block under the left front wheel, and I jacked up the right hand side wheel also, but the wheel has to come off, of course, because you have to do some work from the wheel house, arch, whatever you call it. So I started to work with this. And well, yeah, lifting the car is easy, taking the wheel off is easy, taking the wheel arch lining plastic thing off or away is quite easy. It's just some clips and a couple of screws. Then I had to take the under tray away, of course. Then I got access to things from below, and I could start looking for where to put that screwdriver. And the gearbox is kind of below the battery there, so the right hand intermediate drive shaft comes out from the gearbox, and it's very near that. You will see a little zinc coated metal lid. And when you just lay like that and look up on the engine, you can't really see a screw, but there's a screw there, an M6 with a 10mm socket, hexagonal socket fixing. So you search for that one and unscrew it, and then you can just carefully bend away that little lid. Not away, you can just fold it away, so to speak. You can't remove it. Okay, then I found a screwdriver that was with a good thickness and a good dimension, and it would stay there, and okay, that was the best I could do. And then I covered up the Brembo caliper. I don't want to damage that one because that bolt sits with quite a high torque. So 18mm socket and then some extensioner, and then you just pull as hard as you can, and then you should get it loose. Well, then you should disconnect the battery, you take away the coils, you take out the plugs, make sure that everything is clean so you don't get some dirt into the cylinders. Put some paper in the holes there so you don't happen to drop something down or lose or get some debris into the cylinders. What else? Yeah, then there is this accessory belt, this thing. Yeah, you know it. So it has a tensioner also, and that tensioner you have to unscrew, and then that belt comes away. Then the funny thing starts at the top here, because then it's time to start to work with this, the engine mount. And before that, you see that there are some fuel lines and a AC cooling line. So I detached them as far as I could here. I didn't really open them because then you will get fuel all over. And of course you don't open this cooling line either, but you can loosen them up so you can get better access to things. You can just move them slightly, and if you fear that you might hit or damage something, then put some tape over. Yeah, so that's not too bad, easy job. Then this bracket here sits with some torque screws, so I had to buy myself a new socket. This one says E14. I thought it would have been called Torx something, 6070, but anyhow, no problem. Easy to find. So you unbolt down there. And before you let everything go, if you just take it away, you will drop the engine. So you have to I put another jack under the engine, and I put quite a big wooden block under the oil sump or carter, So you spread out the load. It's just an aluminium casting. You might crack it if you just put too much load onto it. So make sure you spread out the load, and then just apply a very small amount of load, so to speak. And then you can take off the engine mount. There's a second longitudinal engine mount, and there's an 18mm bolt in there, but you can't really access it with a socket and a wrench. So I had to buy this thing instead, 18mm. Fits perfectly well in there. Good. Not too expensive either. Then there is another aluminium casting over the cam belt or the timing belt transmission, and that one sits with a lot of screws, but it's not too bad. You can get access to them. The real hassle comes to getting that casting away. As you can see, there's a little heat shield. You have to unscrew the heat shield. There's another heat shield here. You also have to unscrew that one, so you can kind of gently fold them away a little bit. And then the casting protrudes rearwards. And that little casting is too big. In a way, it has no purpose. The screw sits here, and then it's just metal without any purpose. Unless it's a purpose for some guiding or molding or processing of something, but it has no real functional purpose, that extra piece. So cut it away. Yeah, a little bit. Another thing that I had to modify, so to speak, is that there are some pin screws, and you cannot get this casting away with the original length of those screws. So 2 screws I had to shorten by 3mm. Has absolutely no effect on the function of the engine, but it makes a huge improvement in terms of access. You cannot get that casting away otherwise, at least not in this car and the way it was built or has been built. So again, won't affect anything about the function. That length is just set due to easy entering of the nuts, but that's when you build it in a large process or in a fast process. So then you have that casting away, and you can see the timing belt. Then there is another plastic molding further down, and that one you can partly take from above, but mainly you need to take it from below. And since that little molding was made for the original F4R engine and not for the F4Rt, that generates a lot more heat since you have the really hot turbo on the backside, then it has an extra little heat shield. No, it has 2 heat shields. So first you have to take off the heat shield, and then you can unbolt that little plastic cover. When you've come this far, you have full visibility of the timing belt, and you can see the tensioner pulley and the guide pulley. You can see the water pump. You can also see if you have oil leaks, because Renault apparently doesn't know how to make a proper seal around the camshafts. I have another engine, also twin cam. It has made almost 500,000 kilometers. Those seals have never been replaced. Here on a Renault, they say that you should replace them every 100,000 kilometers or something. It's crap. Anyhow, if you happen to have a low mileage car, which this is, then you could be lucky, which I was. So, and since I will continue to not drive it very far, I will not put a lot of mileage on this car, then they were fine. So I let them stay there. But I could also have not bothered about the water pump, but since there was a water pump in the kit and it's quite easy to replace, then I replaced that one. It's also a bit worse if you start losing water compared to some little oil that seeps out there. So yeah. So next, before you loosen everything or anything, you should choose what to do, because Renault uses, or a professional Renault mechanic, he has special tools, of course. And he has a special tool that you get into the block of the engine, you take away a little plug, and then you put in that tool, and then you put the crankshaft in a certain position, and then you put it in there. And that's not for locking, it's not, you shouldn't apply load on it, but it sets the position of the crankshaft. In the same way, there is a special tool that you put back here. Yeah, exactly, funny. Then you have to take away a lot of more tubes and pipes and stuff. And you have to take away some plugs, so you can get access to slots in the other end of the camshafts. And now that you have to do if you have to replace the seals. But since they were perfectly fine, I were lucky and I did not have to bother about that. But there's one thing, when you take away the timing belt, the camshafts are spring-loaded, so they might turn. And that's, that's a bit of an issue. So the crankshaft will of course not turn. Putting that pin in there is, well, up to you. But what I did was that I put, not really ink, but I put color marks on the sprockets and on the casting, so I really could see that this was lining up well. And I did the same down at the crankshaft, on the crankshaft sprocket out to its casting. Now you might think that it's a bit crude just to take a little color like that, but again, you have to screw out quite badly to put this in the wrong position, because you can see the pitch, whatever you call it, the distance from cog to cog, so to speak, it's almost 1 centimeter. And if you just pay a little attention to detail, so to speak, you will not screw up there. It will work. But the camshafts could very well spring away. So I built a little tool like this. I think it's like 49.5 by 20 something, maybe 3 millimeters thick, and an 80 millimeter fully threaded screw with 3 nuts. And this way you can get that in, and you can get the plates in a good position, and you can lock everything with the nuts, and it stays there. So you can buy, yeah, I can show you. I mean, there are so many Renaults built in the world, so that it's not only Renault that sells tools for doing everything. There are tools for locking the sprockets, setting the camshafts and so on. But yeah, there are aftermarket kits. Here's one, 200 euros, timing belt kit, Renault, F4R, F4Rt, and so on. And they have plenty of stuff. It's kind of interesting to see, especially when they have tools for not timing belts, but for timing chains or cam chains. If you see, like, well, for instance, Porsche, you can buy tools for replacing the timing chain on a Porsche, which means that Porsche have screwed up, and on some of their engines the cam change or timing chains do not last. So anyhow, if this engine has defacers, so it can change the timing of the camshafts. Now on one of those defacers there's a flange, and that prevents you from doing a little trick. Some people, when they replace the timing belt, they split it and let half of it stay. Then they take the new, and push it on. And then they cut the old half split, so to speak, or yeah, exactly. And then they push this one on a little bit more. Not a chance in the world that you would lose the position of any sprocket. Now with that little flange, that was not possible here. So yeah, I did the tool and so on. Anyhow, so you unbolt the, I have it here. You unbolt the tensioner, the tensioner pulley, you unbolt the guide pulley, you take away the timing belt, and then you will see the water pump. I don't remember if it sits, I think it sits like that. 5 M6 screws. And of course, when you untighten them, you have to have some basin under the car, because there will be lots of water coming out, of course. Well, not lots of, I think I lost some 2 liters. It's not too bad. And then you have to make sure that everything gets dry and clean, and then Bosch supplied this little paper gasket. The one I replaced, or no, the one I removed looked like this. Metal piece with some interesting rubber molded around it. So I looked at that paper piece and I thought, no, I won't put a paper piece here. So I bought this one at the nearest Renault dealer. It was cheap. And then, yeah, by the way, again, you know, when you buy things, there comes a little paper on how to do the work. Yeah, funny. Okay. Anyhow, it gives you at least the tightening sequence of those 5 small screws. You shouldn't just tighten them like that. You should tighten them in a cross pattern like that, and a bit more and more and more. And it says don't just fill it up with tap water. Use proper, what does it say? Well, right coolant. Okay. Yeah, the right coolant. I went to Renault to buy their coolant, of course. I did not want to get into any kind of trouble. I think it's called RX Type D or something like that. Yeah, anyhow. And I did not use tap water. I do not use tap water in cooling systems. I buy clean water in a bottle, distilled water or battery water or something like that. Well, so with the new pump in place, you should fill up with the new coolant fluid. I did not get 2 liters in, which meant that I had an air pocket. But at least fill up as much as you can, so you see that there's nothing forgotten, no leak. By the way, those 2 of those 5 screws, it looked like they had some sealant on them. So I put a little engine silicone as a sealant on those 2 screws, and on all screws I put a little bit of thread lock. So when you've come that far, let me think. So yeah, then it's time to get the new belt in position. So now you have the new water pump in place. Then yeah, you have to make sure that on the tensioner sits here. So you have to make sure that this opposite side to the tensioner really is well tensioned like that. If you just let this to be a bit loose, then you might have screwed up and got it one cog wrong. So make sure that it's tight on the water pump side. Because when you got the belt over the sprockets, when you got the belt over the sprockets, you have to get this new tensioner in place. It has a little tongue here, and that one has to get into a little hole or a cavity in the casting there. And it's I just barely could get this pulley out. Of course it sits with a nut, and there's a fixed bolt in the engine or on the engine. So I could just barely get this up. I think I even had to put in a little wooden block or something to push the engine slightly so I could get it up. Now you have to look from underneath, so you make sure that you really get this in position, and then you put the nut on. You don't tighten it to its full torque, but you must make sure that this thing can't come out of position. And then the funny thing starts. Then you have to get the other pulley in position. Yeah, new bolt and so on. But when you have to get this in position, it's kind of tight. This one isn't all that flexible. So, and doing that from underneath, it's not so easy to see. And yeah, that was a bit of a hassle. But trying to do it the other way around, I would not think that that works. And then when you eventually have gotten this in position, make sure that the tensioner hasn't slipped out of position somehow. And then, yeah, then when you see that everything is the way it should be, by the way, that guide pulley should be tightened with 50 Newton meters, it says in some document here. Yeah, funny. Try to get the torque meter down there. Anyhow, yeah, again, you shouldn't do these things if you don't know a little bit about torques and have some kind of calibration in your arm. I mean, some threads are aluminium. You can't just tighten. Yeah, you have to know, have to have some experience in how to tighten a screw into an aluminium thread. Then, yeah, this thing. It has a tiny little arrow and a tiny little groove. And you put a hexagonal, what do you call it? Allen wrench? No, whatever. You put a little wrench or tool in here and you start tightening it. And when you got those two marks to line up, then you tighten the nut. And the nut should be 32 Newton meters. Okay, yeah. Good luck. So I typically use a little bit of thread lock also, because you never know. If you tighten it slightly too low, then that little thread lock might help. Then the new belt is there. Hopefully the markings line up. To be 100% sure, you should put the crankshaft bolt in position again and put an extra washer there. And then you turn the engine so that you see that the marks come back again. You turn it slowly like that and you see that the marks line up. If the marks don't line up, and then I mean more than a centimeter, so to speak, then you have screwed up. Then you have to take things apart and redo it. Yeah, then this, I take this one away. And it's time to get the small plastic cover back again. Yeah, it's easy to stand here and talk about it, but this took a hell of a lot of time. Before I had everything apart and had that thing built, I think it took me a full day. Okay, I'm not that fast when I work on something, but still, yeah, it takes time, especially if you do it the first time, as I did. It takes time, so you should put aside a whole weekend for this work, or several evenings, because it took me, I would think that it took me about 2 full days, so maybe even 20 hours to do the work. A professional Renault mechanic should be able to do this in less than 8 hours, but yeah, that's the way it is. So the plastic cover sits with 3 little screws, and it's not that easy to get access to everything, but yeah, with some patience you can get them in position. Then you have to put on the heat shield. Now I think that was that. So then it's time for this aluminium casting again. Yeah, it's not easy to get it in position. It's tight. But eventually you will get it in position. I think I even made one wall slightly thinner in one area. It's ridiculously tight. But eventually it will sit there. So when you put the casting in place, make sure that those pin bolts have their sleeves in position. Otherwise you will break the cover when you start tightening the nuts there. What else can go wrong? Well, with that cover in place or casting in place, yeah, you have to tighten or put back those heat shields. And it's time to get the engine mounts in place. There's nothing really tricky about that, but the jack might have moved slightly. And when you put this in position, you will, if you have the jack slightly too high and you start tightening up these engine mounts, then you will put the whole weight of the car on the oil sump or carter of the engine. And I'm not so sure that it will withstand that. So you must make sure that you have it in a really good position so you don't start to load or put too much pressure on the engine when you put the engine mount in place. Otherwise it's kind of straightforward, it's nothing special. And well, then you're almost there. Not that much more to do. Of course, yeah, the pulley, of course, and yeah, the pulley should be tightened, and there you can have a torque meter. It's not too difficult. You should have 40 Newton meters on the pulley, and when you have applied 40 Newton meters, it's time for this thing again, and you should tighten it up with 110 degrees. Yeah, with this thing, half a meter maybe. That was, I had to give it all I could to get, yeah, to get close to those 110 degrees. Plus minus 10, I think it says. Okay. So, then it's time for the multi-V accessory belt. And I felt that the bearing in that tensioner was a bit so-so, so I replaced just the bearing. That takes a bit of extra work. You could just buy the whole tensioner for a couple of €100. So it's, yeah, whatever you want to do. I just replaced the bearing. It's doable, but it's another story. Then plugs, coils, wheelhouse lining, battery. Start the engine, if you dare. I did. Of course, check so that you haven't forgotten any tool somewhere. And it started just like that, right away, no issue. Except for one thing. You remember? I didn't get all the fluid in. So, as I saw that the temperature started to rise, I shut it off and checked here, and I saw that, oh, okay, now I can get more liquid in, more fluid in. So I filled it up, ran the engine a bit, shut it off, filled in a bit more, and so on. So you make sure that you don't boil the engine just because you forgot to put in that last liter of engine coolant. Yeah. What do you think? Easy job, or? Good luck. And don't blame me if you screw up. This is just my amateur perspective on things. But this engine runs and it has not failed so far. So I think I got it right. Yeah, again, good luck. Yeah, keep your eyes open. There will be more coming. Bye for now.